It's the Locked On Flyers podcast for Friday, December 6th, your daily dose of Flyers news, analysis, and high quality content. Really, really wish the Flyers could have pulled that one out.
Chaotic.
You're Locked On Flyers, your daily podcast on the Philadelphia Flyers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hey there, and thanks for making Locked On Flyers your first listen every day. I am Rachel Donner. I've been podcasting about the Flyers, the NHL, and hockey for a decade. I'm here with prospect expert and Flyers credentialed reporter for 19 years, Russ Cohen. You can keep the season going with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. And to keep up with our episodes and all the Flyers' latest news, you can find us at Locked On Flyers on all your favorite socials, including Blue Sky. And of course, here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Russ, I think first off, with this game, and there was a lot to it here, but I think both of us were probably genuinely surprised that Sam Ersson was not in the game to begin with.
Yes, definitely was. I don't have a reason why he wasn't, but now we're thinking he's going to play in Boston, but we don't know.
Yeah, it was really interesting to activate him and then go with Fedotov, who was in their alternating plan as they had been doing with Kolosov as the backup, and not even having Ersson out there as a backup. I think was genuinely surprising. Unfortunately, with the goaltending, Fedotov gets pulled after the first period, and I'm just wondering, based on how Kolosov played the rest of the game, having to come in first thing in the second period, being on the penalty kill, was that something that really affected his game, do you think?
Something affected his game. Obviously, he wasn't sharp, and so
Yeah.
I did ask that question aloud in the third period, was this a good move to change the goaltending at all? We wondered then, was it too early? And it's fair to question it at that point, too. It's just, I'm not sure. I mean, I know the coach did it to fire up his team. It wasn't really Fedotov's fault. You could argue that, hey, it worked because they tied it, but then, you could also argue that some of those goals were not great, 2 or 3 of them.
Right. So. Right. Especially that fifth Florida goal.
Yeah.
It seemed to be very clearly on Kolosov this time around. And, I think it's definitely a 2020 hindsight kind of situation here. I think there's no right answer.
I'm not sure there's a right answer either. I'll be honest. Yeah.
Yeah. But, I do think it's an important question to ask. I think, the other big factor here was the lack of discipline at the end of the game. I think I understand that hit in the boards against Sanheim, I believe it was pretty rough, but you have to know that you've already been scored against twice on the power play in this game, and giving Florida, the defending Stanley Cup champion team, a power play with less than 3 minutes to go in the game is probably not the right move. And you just got to tamper it down, whatever it is.
Yeah, I'm going to go one before that. I think the Flyers had him in a good spot, and then Bobby Brink started some what, and I think that's what really started the downward spiral, because then Konechny had to get involved with him. They're both in the box. And then, a little bit later, everybody's still supercharged. And then some more stupidity ensued. And look, this is what Florida will do. They'll drag you into the gutter that way, and you have to kind of know they're doing it. Matvei Michkov came out at the end of the game, was really honest. He goes, look, this isn't a recipe for winning. But the one thing he said that resonated, and I had mentioned it during the game, there were times when the Flyers' power play looked absolutely pitiful. Zone entries were almost non-existent.
Yeah.
And Tkachuk said, listen, the special teams won this game for us. It wasn't pretty, but that's how it ended up.
Yeah. So Florida ended up technically being 4 for 5 on the power play. Just, one of them was an empty netter, but they were still on the power play technically. Flyers were 1 for 4 on the power play. So yeah, special teams were brutal overall for the Flyers. And I think that point about the Flyers power play stance. I think they had one quality zone entry that I saw on the power play. And, you know, Florida was physical, as they always are. Hits were 37-16. You know, and I think, speaking to what the Flyers did do well in this game, I think, you know, they battled really hard in terms of once they got back on track after being down the 3 goals, right? Once they turned things around, things were actually very good structurally for the Flyers. And they were doing an excellent job of keeping the Panthers from taking shots at all, let alone quality shots. And you look at like the giveaway takeaway stats, pretty much even, right? Which is an unusual thing for a Flyers game.
Yeah, no question. I think you could argue, though, that when the Flyers finally took the lead, they should have stopped the shortening of the bench, because there was a point where Konechny had 20 minutes and Lawton had just over 8, and then Lawton finally saw the ice at around the 11-minute mark in the third period. Like, he was running some of those guys into the ground. I don't even know what Sanheim ended up with. He had 19 minutes with a lot of the third period to go. So that adds up when you're playing against a fast, physical team like Florida, and then all of a sudden tempers get involved. You know, there's a mental fatigue factor.
There is that. Konechny actually wound up with more ice time than Sanheim in this game, if you can believe it.
That's crazy.
But yeah, Sanheim was at 24:51 and Konechny was at 25:22. I mean, it's obvious that, you know, you want to put Konechny out there in key situations, but when you force too many key situations,
like everything can't be a key situation.
Yeah, exactly.
No, I get it. I get it. Look, I mean, on the plus side, Matvei Michkov had his first 3-point game. He was terrific. Tippett made a couple of great plays. I don't even know, that second goal, like, he fell down, and then when he got up, he still scored the goal. Like, this game was weird. Kachuk even said at the end that he said this was a weird game. Like, it was. It was weird. I turned it a circus at one point, because when the pushing and shoving started, like, it was wild. I mean, Bill Zito was in the elevator. He couldn't get downstairs quick enough. And I think he, you know, didn't like the elevator he was in, because, you know, that elevator can be a little slow. He was, even though they won the game, he did not seem pleased either. So, like, it was weird. Then you walk into the Panthers locker room and they're playing You Could Call Me Al. Like, that hasn't been a hit for like 45 years. I don't know how many years. But, you know, so the whole thing was just, this was one of the weirdest games I've attended and covered.
Yeah, I think, you know, going back to Owen Tippett for a second, because you talked about the play on one of the goals. I think it's really important for Owen Tippett's confidence to have had a game like this.
Yeah.
And the fact that one of his goals was on the rush, like his usual Tippett style, right?
Yeah.
And then there was the one play where they were already in the zone and it was off a takeaway, and he was standing still when he took that shot. And I think having 2 goals that are very different styles of play, I think will help his confidence moving forward.
Yeah, it's got to help him. There's no question. I mean, he followed up his own shot on the 1 goal too, and that's and that's a big deal. So yeah, that's, you know, again, goaltending on both sides was not fantastic. Kolosov, honestly, this is the game that probably should get him sent down, to be fair.
Yeah, it's interesting because, you know, we did that episode where we talked about what should happen here, and both of us were pretty clear that we wanted Kolosov to be sent down because there was just a little bit of learning he needed to do, and a little bit of lack of maturity. Not that he's a bad goaltender or anything, but that's what we thought. And I think this game kind of played out like that. I think
it did.
You know, to the point on Fedotov that you made about, you know, it was more about motivating the Flyers skaters than it was about his play in net. And, you know, I just don't, you can't evaluate Fedotov in this game at all.
No.
But you can Kolosov, I think. And I really think that our point stands about him. I really do. And it's, again, I think he's a really good goaltender. I just think
he's going to be a good one, but he
needs more reps in a little bit different of an
and he has to get physically stronger. Like, they piled up in front of him for a reason. Like, they knew.
Yeah. The other good thing about this game is the depth scoring. So Nick Seeler and Garnet Hathaway scoring in this game. First off, Nick Seeler, when he does that, which is like once in a blue moon,
man, it's funny.
It's so crazy. But then he'll throw this amazing play together, and I love it every single time. But yeah, I just think getting that depth scoring in a game like this, in combination with your top guys like Tippett having 2 goals, Michkov having the 3 assists, I think that's the secret sauce, right? You just have to add a little bit more discipline here to complete the game, right?
Well, the thing is, like, the Michkov Tippett line produces offense. It doesn't produce a lot of defense.
No.
And so that's what you have to decide. Like, if you have those guys out, you pretty much should have your top pairing out, because there's going to be some issues.
Yeah, that's fair. And then the other thing too is that, you know, we harp on them having more net front pressure.
Yeah.
They did that in this game.
They
like
did.
3 of the goals were pretty much net front in this game. So, you know, I think
because they were behind and got challenged, and I'm sure they got challenged by the coach in the locker room, that he got them to do that. But if you watch Florida, like, Tkachuk does that all game long. And Verhaeghe. Verhaeghe won almost every battle in the crease to get second shots or get position. You know, those are things. I mean, you know, the one thing, look, there's a reason Florida won a championship. At the end of the game, like, Bennett scores the big goal, right? He gets that goal. He's on the bike. He didn't even interview yet. He was on the bike for at least 10 minutes, 15 minutes after the game, you know? It's like there's a difference, something to work towards when you watch that team. That's, you know, that's what I saw.
Yeah, I believe it. It's just you know, that next level that the Flyers are working towards, and
Correct.
I don't think this is a bad night per se. I think it's just a weird game.
It's disappointing, and that's what it is. That's how you take it.
So we're gonna move ahead to the next game against Boston. We are gonna talk about the week ahead, the Boston Bruins, Utah Hockey Club, all of that coming up next.
Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. I'd still go with Kansas City with the money line this week. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL.
So on Monday's show, we are going to recap the Bruins and Utah game that we're going to preview coming up shortly. But like going into next week, it's an interesting week, partially because there's like a wide gamut of teams that the Flyers are facing. But you know, there's going to be more talk about 4 nations. There's going to be more talk about World Juniors as the selection camps are happening. But this little 4 nations thing that we didn't talk about yet on the show related to the selection of Travis Sanheim. Joel Farabee had something to say about that on Twitter, quoting somebody who said that they were confused by the pick of Sanheim. And Joel Farabee said, watch a game, which that's pretty bold, pretty direct.
It's very direct. I would say that, yeah, there's probably this rep that Sanheim has out there, and it has changed. So I would agree with that.
Yeah, I think so. You know, there's always arguments to be made for other guys making the team too.
Sure.
But to say that Sanheim is a surprise this season, the way he's been playing, like, it does not check out, in my opinion. In the World Junior land, you know, of course, we talked on yesterday's show about potential Flyers making rosters, especially Team Canada, who has their selection camp coming up this week. So we're going to talk about that. We also talked about Michael Misa being omitted from that camp and it being kind of a mystery. He's a draft eligible prospect we've talked about on the show already, but he got in some hot water this week as well, right?
Yeah, there was a teddy bear toss. I assume it was in Saginaw where he plays, and he backhanded the teddy bear into the crowd. One of them, just one lone teddy bear, and for that he got suspended because they opened up the rule book, and the OHL showed him like, here, over here, you can't throw a projectile into the crowd, but it's a teddy bear.
Oh
What
my
was the
God.
teddy bear going to do to somebody? Was it going to
I
take an
know.
eye
Well,
out? Like what? Seriously?
yeah, and I thought like players threw like pucks into the crowd during warm-ups.
Apparently
Like,
not. Not in the OHL.
no, did not know that. Interesting. Oh,
So he
that's
got
lame.
suspended, or he's getting suspended for a game.
Yeah. Well, the Phantoms have their teddy bear toss game this weekend as well. So we're going to talk about that
Hopefully,
on
none end
next
up in the
week's.
crowd over the glass.
Yeah. Yeah. Usually goes the other way over
Yes.
the glass onto the ice. We're going to talk about that next Tuesday. Next week, the Flyers face the Blue Jackets, the Red Wings, and the Wild. And it's interesting because the Blue Jackets are like
They
neck
don't
and
face
neck.
Rockford, right? I just hope they don't face
No,
Rockford. Just a little
listen, that's
preview
a
for
whole
next week.
other thing. A whole other thing. But the Blue Jackets have been neck and neck with the Flyers, kind of in this like, there is no mushy middle in the Metro right now. It's the top three teams and everybody else
Correct.
in another. It's like a mushy everybody else,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And so the Blue Jackets are part of this, and I think it's gonna be a pretty intense game, in my
It
opinion.
will. They're riding emotion, and Zach Werenski's having a tremendous year. Mark Scheig, pointed out some of his,
Hmm.
finer points, and we're just used to Zach Werenski being hurt. When this guy plays, he's a massive factor. So this will be a difficult game. It will, and it will be emotional. And this is one where the Flyers are going to have to really play this by the book. If you start, having some penalties or trying to goad them into penalties and it doesn't work out, it could go the other way.
Yeah, yeah. So that is going to be definitely a benchmark kind of
Yes.
game in terms of can the Flyers, rise to the top of this bottom bunch of teams in the
Right.
division. The Red Wings have been on the massive struggle bus.
Oh yeah.
All sorts of rumors out there about potential firings in this organization, and it's kind of a mystery and also not a mystery, right? Because they just
Yeah.
aren't improving enough skills
No.
wise to take that next step.
No, but it doesn't mean they don't play good games. Like, they have talent on the team, and you
They
have to
just
watch
lose
out
by a
for it.
goal
They
all the
do. They
time.
just Yeah, it's just what's happening. It happened to the Oilers for a while. So, but all that said, they have some good players, and Patrick Kane's coming in. You know about him.
Right.
He is older, but Dylan Larkin's a guy you really have to worry about. Like, that's somebody you have to really worry about. And I think Simon Edmondson is still up, right? And he's been playing great. So that's another guy who's a big, strong kid to go along with, Sider and the rest. So there's a lot of guys to worry about. It's just, yeah, they are beatable and you should win. That's the way it should go.
Right. And then the Minnesota Wild, of course, absolutely
Mm,
destroying it out there.
yeah.
And, as of this recording, they're on a 4-game win streak. As part of that, they're just scoring goals like it's going out of style. They just got David Jiricek added to the team. And so it's going to be a real interesting week for the Flyers next week.
It will. Minnesota's a tough team, and whether they play Fleury or Gustafson, it's going to be hard. Kaprizov's one of the top players in the league, period. So, yeah, tough game.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, before we get to those games, the Flyers are going to have to face the Boston Bruins and the team in Utah, future called the
Or
Yeti,
maybe
I
not.
guess,
They're
or
saying
maybe not.
they might just
We'll
keep the
see.
name. We'll see. I don't think they will because, like, let's just say for argument's sake, like, they get a sponsor named Yeti. They might go with that name. Just saying.
Could be. Could be. All right. We're going to get to those two matchups coming up next. All right, so the Boston Bruins, they are 6-2-0 since their coaching change with Joe Sacco behind the bench there. Not too shabby, I would say. And right now, Hampus Lindholm has been day to day, so not sure what's going on with him. That could have affected his not being selected for Four
Possibly.
Nations.
Yeah.
But we'll see. Since we saw them last on November 2nd, of course, we've split the 2 games, and this is going to be the last game against the Bruins
Yeah.
this season
I like it
already.
when
It's
I like seeing
kind
the
of
Bruins.
weird.
I do. Yeah.
Yeah, so they are 6-3-1 in their last 10. They've won 3 in a row. Their most recent game was Wednesday against the Blackhawks, where Brad Marchand and Morgan Geekie each had 2 goals in that game. Jeremy Swayman was in net for that one. We got Corpusalo, I believe, the last game
Yes.
against the Bruins. I know we saw each of the goaltenders once, I think, in the previous 2 matchups, but I think we're gonna see Swayman this
Yeah, I
time
think so.
around just because of the day break in between. So, this is gonna be a really tough matchup again because the Bruins have stepped it up a lot since the coaching change.
Yeah, I've seen an uptick in their play. I was watching them against Chicago, and they were doing the right things against Chicago. You know, Chicago can be dangerous. Bedard was actually doing really well that game. Uh, he
I
wasn't
think he was
selected.
bitter.
He wasn't selected either, folks. But yeah, so and Don Sweeney apparently talked about that and said he's not out for the Olympics. He's just not on this team. Okay, Don. All right.
Alright.
So at any rate, yeah, the Bruins are fired up. I mean, I was on the USA conference call for the Four Nations, and Charlie McAvoy is very fired up. So I would expect a big time effort out of him. He's going to want to prove that he's like the number one guy going into that tournament. Plus, they're going to go
Right.
play games in Boston, right? So that's a home game, and he mentioned
Oh,
that.
yeah.
Yeah. So this is going to be a very hard game because the Bruins know, hey, if they trip up, the Flyers are on nipping at their heels, and they're going to want to create some separation.
Yeah, absolutely. And a couple of the big changes that the Bruins have made since we saw them last, and this coaching change has taken more of a full effect. One thing that they're doing is shooting a lot more,
Hmm.
and that's dangerous for the Flyers because they tend to rely on the shot blocking technique, right? In terms of,
That's
how to
true.
do that. They're going to have to, I think, look more at shot suppression and get sticks in there and not have to have like 25 blocks in this game, right?
Yeah, and I did notice Pasternak got hot.
Mhm.
Like he's on a little bit of a heater right now. So that's something where the Flyers are used to that. Like he usually scores against them. But in the last game, he wasn't that good against them. Now it's going to be a different Pasternak.
Right, absolutely, and I think that a bunch of these guys, like,
Yeah,
Marchand, as I just mentioned, has stepped it up. He was
he
struggling,
has. Oh, he was doing
earlier
awful. He was awful
early
early on.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, so I think that there's, like, a lot of guys who have just stepped it up a notch, especially the veteran leaders who
Yes.
felt a huge responsibility for their coach getting fired,
Right.
and so they have to turn it around, and, they have the personnel to do it. It's just a matter of getting their system in place. And I think the other aspect of it is rebound control. And I think,
Yeah.
whoever's in net, Erson maybe will be in net for this one. We'll see. But I think that, the Flyers just can't allow rebounds. And if there is a rebound that pops out, the defensemen have to be Johnny on the spot in terms of clearing them because the Bruins are absolutely pouncing on those rebounds. And you can see it in their stats. They're having more rebound shot attempts as of late. So I think that'll be a big deal too.
Yeah, they're going to play their best game. There's no question. These are an important 2 points, even though it's this time of the year, because again, the Flyers may be a team chasing them, and I'm sure they're going to get um, that talk in the locker room by Joe
Yeah.
Sacco.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, these games tend to be pretty like fast paced between the
Yes.
Flyers and Bruins, tend to go end to end really quickly throughout the game. But then, it is a physical game for sure between the two teams, but they keep the speed up. And I think it's just a unique style of play when the
And
Flyers
it's a one
play the
o'clock
Bruins.
game. Flyers are hit and miss. Last time they were really good in the afternoon, but that's a rarity. A lot of times they've been sleepy in these 1 o'clock games. So we'll see. I mean, it's on the road. At home, I think they've done better with these early games, but I'm not sure, 1 o'clock on the road, how that's going to go.
Right. Well, in some ways it's a good thing, and in some ways it's not a good thing. But the game against Utah is in the evening, so they'll have a little bit more
Right.
rest in the back-to-back situation, and have more of their regular routine going for the Sunday game. And given that Utah will also be on the second half of a back-to-back, having even that little extra recovery time, I think will be helpful for the Flyers. That, we're playing them on Sunday night, so we don't have to deal with brunch that day.
That's true.
But looking at what they've been up to, since this is the Flyers' first game against this team in its existence as the Utah Hockey Club, they are facing the Sabres on Saturday. And so the Sabres have been a train wreck, but in the most
Yeah, they
entertaining
lost a
way.
4-goal
So
lead
they
recently.
did. So, who knows how that game is going to go. Before that, Utah lost to the Stars 2-1 in a very, very hard fought
Yeah,
game.
that was a good game.
It was very close. And then they shut out Vegas 6-0 the game before that, which was a very difficult thing to do, to put up 6 goals against Vegas and shut them out. I think that's a pretty remarkable accomplishment
Oh, it
defensively
is.
for them. Game before that, they lost in overtime to the Oilers. So even when they're losing, they're playing very close games here. And, they tend to lose these 1-goal games this year. And that's why their record isn't as good as maybe, they got off to a good start, but now they're in 6th place in the division, 4-5-1 in their last 10 prior to this game against the Sabres. And I think, it's kind of a mixed bag here. Like, it's kind of hard to tell what Utah team is going to show up, except for the fact that they are going to be very structured defensively.
Yeah, it seems like Nick Schmaltz has picked it up. I think Clayton Keller is going to have a burr under his saddle for the Four Nations. And Dylan Guenther's been great. Like, he's 21 years
Yes.
old and he's almost a point a game. He's got double-digit goals already. So he's a legit threat. To be honest, Dylan Guenther has the kind of numbers that Tyson Forster should have. Like, that's just a reality. Like, that's because they're similar players.
Yeah. I mean, I think you can make that argument. I think that Dylan Guenther has been given more responsibility than Tyson Forster.
Yes.
And the Flyers have that luxury to bump Forster down to
Yeah.
the third line if they need to, but Utah doesn't have the personnel to do that.
No.
And so the fact that he is coming through when he's been given extra responsibility, I think it is a big deal. Right now, he's the second highest scorer on the team at the moment, and he has the most goals on the team. Clayton Keller has the most points
And he's a big,
on
fast kid.
Utah.
Like, he's a hard guy
Yeah.
to deal with. So they are going to have to game plan a little bit for him and Keller for sure.
And especially because Guenther has 4 power play goals.
Yeah.
I think that's a big deal. So
It
even
is.
though the Flyers' penalty kill is generally very good, they do have a few really good power play guys on their
They
squad.
do.
So I think that is going to be a huge deal as well. Interesting looking at some of their stats. Very, very similar shooting percentage at 5-on-5. Literally almost the same goals for per 60 in all situations. Utah does take a lot of penalties though. So like, for whatever it's worth, the Flyers power play could have some additional opportunities. They have not had as many as of late.
Right.
So maybe this is the game where things will go off for them, but
Maybe. And maybe donkeys will fly too.
yeah, we'll see. But I think that, this is a game that the Flyers can't like hold back on
Right.
or take for granted. They're going to
Yeah, you
have to play
can't
a
take this
button
one
down
easy.
game.
Right. No, they definitely do. And I'm not sure who will be in net for Utah. That'll be interesting to see. But their goaltending is good enough. It's not super fantastic. Like, they should be able
Right.
to score in this game. They should be able to score at least 3. The question is, will they
That-
give up 4?
Right. That's the idea, I think, is for them to be able to score at least 3. And I think this is also a game where Utah struggles when they're behind. They just can't tie it up
Yeah.
sometimes. So getting a lead, at least a 2-goal lead on this team is the way to go, which I know is the case for most games, but
No,
I
but I
think
mean,
extra with this
there are some
particular
teams, the
team.
Flyers have, been coming back a lot this year. There are some teams, Colorado obviously came back against the Sabres and have had a few of those, came back against the Flyers. So some teams are better at it than others.
Right. So this back-to-back has a lot of challenges, but again, a lot of
But
opportunity
at least
here.
there's that
And
extra time, like you talked about. They only have to get from Boston to Philly. They have that extra
Mhm.
time. Now, again, it's not the Flyers' fault that this game is at 7:30. This seems to be an
No.
ESPN thing. It's sort of the
Yep.
way it was worded when it was when they let us know that it was 7:30. Because I think the Flyers were cognizant of people have to have jobs the next day, and 7:30 is like the cutoff for like being able to get home maybe by 11, so you could
Right.
get up at 5 or 6. And
Yep.
ESPN's just like, we have the TV contract, whatever. And I bet you even on press row, it's going to be less attended than normal. A Sunday night 7:30 game is not ideal for anybody.
Yeah. It is not. It is not, but 7:30 it shall
It
be.
is.
So we'll see how it affects the game or if not at all. And we'll talk about it on the Monday show when we recap the Bruins and Utah game, plus have our nemesis of the week.
Oh,
And
mine's a good one. You'll really
oh,
like it.
I can't wait. I cannot wait. As a reminder, we always want to hear from you. So if you've got Flyers thoughts or mailbag questions, let us know on any of our socials at Locked On Flyers. You can email us at lockedonflyers@gmail or comment over on our YouTube channel. I'm Rachel. I'm on Blue Sky and Twitter at rmiriam. That's RMIRIAM.
I'm Russ. I'm also on the same socials at Sportsology, SPORTSOLOGY.
Thanks for making Locked On Flyers your first listen today. For your next listen, find Locked On Fantasy Hockey. Become a fantasy hockey expert. Get the edge over your league mates with daily tips from Steal and Flip. Find Locked On Fantasy Hockey on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. Have a great day, everyone.